So this is going to be more on how to solve for friction force, how we're finding friction force. So can somebody read the problem? A 4 kg brick is sliding on a surface. The coefficient of kinetic friction between the surface is 0.25. Between the surface is saying whatever surface is sliding on versus the actual brick itself. The surface of the brick and wherever, maybe the floor or ice or whatever it is, there are two surfaces right now creating that kinetic friction force. Now, we know what we're solving for. We know that we're trying to find the force of friction. But before we do anything, do you guys remember how we played Among Us? Or how you guys play Among Us, right? When you play Among Us, you have a focus. Your focus is the imposter, right? Based on that, the same idea goes throughout physics too. The focus is what is the object? What is a focus object that we are actually talking about? Because if you don't know the focus object, you can't truly pull out facts because you don't really know what the facts are for. So what's the focus object? The brick. So knowing that is really important. Okay, brick is the focus object. What facts do you know about this brick right now?
Kilograms.
It's 4 kilograms. So 4 kilograms is for what? What variable would that go into? Mass. 4 kilograms is mass. And I'm glad that you guys know that. That's good. What other facts can you pull about this brick?
Friction.
Okay, it's going through kinetic friction right now. How do you know it's going through kinetic friction? That's very important to understand. How do you know it's going through kinetic friction?
Because it says it.
Well, yeah, it says it, but even if it didn't say it, go beyond that. How do you know it's going through kinetic? If you know what kinetic friction really means in your mind, how do you know it's going through kinetic friction?
Sliding on a surface?
Yes, it is in motion. It is sliding on a surface. That's important because when you go into static friction, static is not going to be a movement. That's why I want you guys to be able to identify why it is kinetic friction, because it's sliding, it's in motion. And kinetic friction has to do with movement. That's the point I want to make. Now, because it's sliding and kinetic friction plays a part, we know that there's a coefficient of kinetic friction. Let's go back to something we've already learned. Do you know the coefficient is right now 0.25? Because it's 0.25, what surface do you think this item is sliding on if the coefficient of kinetic friction is 0.25? Give me something closer to that number.
Ice.
Okay, keep in mind if it's sliding on ice, the coefficient of kinetic friction is less than 0.25. So we're looking for something close to 0.25. What's close to 0.25?
Wood on wood.
Wood on wood. So now you have an idea that maybe this brick is sliding on wood. So now understanding that, we can have a better image in our head on what we're working with. Okay, now we know that the coefficient, I'm going to write CKF. CKF is going to be short for coefficient of kinetic friction, is 0.25. It's stated there. Is there any other facts that we need? So now, looking at this, is there any other facts that we need? Any other facts about the brick that we need to know or care about? Absolutely not. You're right. There is no other facts. It's only given to us right now. 4 it's the mass of 4 and its friction force when it comes down to the kinesthetic of the coefficient of kinesthetic is 0.25. Now, what are we trying to find? Let's go to that.
The force of friction.
Yes, good. And that's literally in the question. We are looking for friction force. So I'm going to go ahead and write friction force. And I hope you are taking notes too, because this is going to help you especially. So you're looking for the friction force. If I'm looking for friction force, go back to your equations. What equation did you write down that ties into looking or finding friction force?
FFR equals UKXFN.
Oh yeah, that sounds so much more difficult when you say it like that. But I will simplify it for those who need it. So F, that giant F that you see, and make sure you take notes on this too, so you know what they mean. So this FFR that he just stated is actual friction. This is friction. This is the friction force itself. So friction force equals the coefficient. So I'm going to write, again, CKF as a short term for coefficient of kinetic friction. That's my short term. You can use it if you like. That's fine. So CKF, and then it's being multiplied by FN. What's FN? Can you remember that? What's FN?
Net force.
Net force. It's net force. Exactly. You identify net force by doing what? How do you solve for net force sometimes?
Gravity.
Mass times gravity. In other cases, it could be mass times acceleration too. It all depends on what the question or the equation is giving you, or what the question is asking you. So you have Fn. But in this case, looking at your facts, is the net force given to you? Did anything in your facts say net force? Absolutely not. It doesn't. So how can I make this work for me so I can find net force? Because I want to find net force, but I don't have it.
The coefficient force, I guess you do inverse operation. So you divide the coefficient and the friction force.
Okay, that's a great observation. Does anybody have something different? That's an interesting way of thinking. I like that. I like that. Let's see if anyone else have something different. Like, how can I find, because remember, look at your facts. Net force is not given to you. How do you usually find net force? Because we need to figure out what to plug in for net force, though. How are you going to find it?
What's it called? The mass.
Say that one more time.
I said, don't you have to find gravity because you already got the mass?
You got to find gravity? I thought you knew what gravity was. What's gravity? What's gravity? It's constant.
Oh, you could find, what's it called? The acceleration?
Well, you were right the first time you were saying it. You said, we already vocalized. How do we find net force? Mass times gravity. Great. Now we know that information. To find net force, mass times gravity. Look at the facts. What do you have that could help you find net force?
We have the mass.
We have the
and we have
mass.
gravity.
We just need gravity. But guess what? Do we know what gravity is?
No.
Yes, we do. You know why? Because we've been doing the same thing for how long now? What's gravity?
9.8.
9.8. It's never changed. It's not going to change. If you Google it, it's going to be the same. So you're going to change that Fn to 4 times 9.8 now. Because that is how you find friction. That's how you find net force. Any questions on that? So now that you have that, you can go ahead and actually replace your variables with the facts given to you. So go ahead and replace that variables. And tell me what the entire replacement is going to look like.
4 times 9.8.
You guys are so smart. That literally is it. Okay, so I'm going to take this, copy, paste it. And I'm going to say, okay, well, my coefficient of kinetic friction is 0.25. And I'm multiplying that by 4 times 9.8. Because 4 times 9.8 gives me my actual net force anyway. So, step number 1. So now that you have your blueprint, or step 0, step 1. What's step 1 for you? What do you know how to do based on step 0?
The parentheses.
Multiply within the parentheses. Good. That's beautiful observation. So go ahead and do such things. Go ahead and do that. When you multiply 4 times 9.8, what is your new step that you're now working with?
You get 2.45.
2.45. Can someone double check on that? For
39.2.
you got 39.2. Could someone else double check?
I got 39.
It's 39.
39.2. Okay, I hear a lot of people say 39.2.
Sorry
Beautiful.
about that.
No, that's perfect. That's exactly why we all double check to make sure, because that's how we support each other. Good. So 39.2. Beautiful. Now that you have 39.2, what can you do in the next step? What do you know how to do to get from step 1 to step 2? You want to get from step 1 to
425 times 39.2.
beautiful. Do that. If you know how to do it, do it.
9.8.
Okay, so you got 9.8. You got 9.8. And that is most likely going to be our solution. So we can say that the friction force is 9.8 Newton. I'm going to say Newton because we're talking about force. Now, going back to this equation, I want you guys to know, working through it, you guys got it right. It is literally going to be 9.8 Newtons. How was that for you guys? Easy or hard?